Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you train people to give you. And the truth is, most women don't get disrespected because they're weak. They get disrespected because they're too strong in the wrong places and too soft in the places that matter. Today, I'm going to show you the 9 strong behaviors that make a man respect you for life. Not for a moment, not for a phase, but for life. And once you master these, you'll never have to explain your worth again. It will be felt every time you walk into the room. When you walk into any relationship, romantic or otherwise, you have to understand something powerful. You are always teaching people how to treat you. Not through lectures, not through speeches, but through the tone you set from day one. Most people think respect comes later, after time, after closeness, after commitment. But the truth is, respect starts in the very first interaction. And it starts with you deciding who you are, what you allow, and what you refuse to carry on your shoulders. You set the tone by the way you respond, not the way you react. You set the tone by showing that your emotions don't run the show you do. When someone meets you, they're not just looking at your face, your words, your smile. They're scanning for something deeper. They're looking for whether you're grounded. They're trying to see if you're the kind of person who knows their worth, or the kind who bends the moment they feel pressure. And the person who commands lifelong respect is the one who quietly communicates, "This is who I am." I don't shift based on who walks into the room. Most women lose respect not because they're too soft, but because they give away the power of the tone without even realizing it. They let someone else dictate how the conversation will flow, how much time they'll tolerate, how much confusion they'll accept, how much inconsistency they're willing to wait through. And every time you do that, you chip away at your own authority. But when you set the tone, you don't wait for someone to treat you well, you treat yourself well first, and they follow that lead. Setting the tone doesn't mean being harsh. It doesn't mean raising your voice or trying to prove a point. It simply means you show up with emotional clarity. You speak calmly, you respond thoughtfully, and you make it known through your actions, not your attitude that your life has structure, that your heart isn't available for chaos, and that your time has value. When you operate like that, the room adjusts to you, and that's the difference between someone who is respected temporarily and someone who is respected for life. People naturally rise or fall based on the level of energy you present. If you come in frantic, they treat you like someone who can be pushed. If you come in uncertain, they treat you like someone who can be persuaded. If you come in desperate for validation, they treat you like someone who needs approval to feel secure. But if you come in rooted, clear in your standards, calm in your delivery, steady in your emotions, others instinctively respect you because they can feel you're not playing at your worth, you're living it. And here's the secret. The tone you set is always felt before it's understood. People don't immediately notice your standards, but they notice how they feel around you. They notice they can't talk to you recklessly. They notice they can't disappear and reappear without consequences. They notice they can't create confusion and get rewarded with your attention. They notice that if they want access to you, they have to bring clarity, honesty, and consistency. By the time they even realize what's happening, you've already established the foundation. Setting the tone is the quiet power that strong women use without even announcing it. It's the confidence of knowing you don't have to force anything, chase anything, or convince anyone. You're not shaping yourself to fit their expectations. You're letting them adjust to yours. And that shift, that silent recalibration, is what makes the right men step up and the wrong men quietly step out. Because the tone you set becomes the treatment you receive. Consistency is one of the most revealing behaviors a person can show you, and the way you respond to it or the lack of it determines how deeply someone will respect you. Most people don't lose respect in big dramatic moments. They lose it in the small spaces where they reward inconsistency without even realizing it. They let things slide, they make excuses. They hope the person will go back to how they were in the beginning. And every time you tolerate a shift downward, you teach the other person that the standard can be lowered without consequence. But the truth is simple. People respect what they have to work for, not what they can fluctuate with. When a man sees that you allow his effort to rise and fall depending on his mood, his attention, or his convenience, he starts to believe that your stability depends on his inconsistency. And that's where the respect disappears. Not because you're unworthy, but because you showed him that he doesn't have to be consistent to keep you. When your standards stay steady, you become the anchor in the relationship dynamic. You're not moved by sweet talk, you're moved by follow-through. You're not impressed by big promises, you're impressed by repeated actions. And once someone realizes you value consistency more than charm, the entire way they show up begins to shift. They stop trying to get by with effort that spikes and crashes. They start understanding that access to you requires steadiness, not just moments of intensity. See, a lot of women confuse kindness with acceptance. They think being understanding means tolerating inconsistency. But there's a difference between empathy and enabling. You can be compassionate about someone's struggles without letting those struggles become a pattern that drains you. You can care about someone without letting them violate the structure of how you want to be treated. You can support someone while still expecting them to show up in a way that aligns with who they said they were. Consistency is not about being perfect, it's about being reliable. And reliability builds trust. Trust builds safety. Safety builds respect. Without consistency, everything becomes unstable. Your heart becomes unpredictable. The connection becomes unbalanced. And eventually, you start working harder to close the gap that the other person's inconsistency created. That's when the dynamic flips. That's when you lose yourself trying to keep the relationship steady while they freely drift in and out. But when you refuse to reward inconsistency, you put that responsibility back where it belongs with the person giving the inconsistent behavior. You hold your boundary not as a punishment, but as a reflection of the fact that your emotional life has structure. When someone pulls back, you don't chase. When someone is unclear, you don't fill in the blanks for them. When someone's words don't match their actions, you don't cling to the poetry they have to match the reality. People learn quickly that they cannot keep you with half effort. They cannot keep you with occasional attention. They cannot keep you with emotional ups and downs that you're expected to absorb. You become the kind of woman whose respect is earned through consistency, not through scattered effort. And here's the beautiful part. When you set that standard, the right men don't get intimidated, they get inspired. They step up. They get more intentional. They become more consistent because they can feel that you're not someone who settles for halfway. You're someone who requires presence, not promises. Because the moment you stop rewarding inconsistency, you stop accepting less than what you deserve. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of communication, yet it's one of the most powerful tools you will ever hold. Most people think silence means you're shutting down, avoiding the issue, or backing away from the conversation. But silence used the right way is not avoidance, it's clarity, it's emotional discipline. It's the ability to stay grounded when someone else is trying to pull you into chaos. It is you choosing presence instead of pressure, intention instead of impulse. You don't always need to respond right away. You don't always need to prove your point. You don't always need to fire back with the perfect sentence. When someone says something triggering, tries to provoke a reaction, or brings confusion into the space, your silence often reveals more than your words ever could. Because silence forces people to sit with themselves. Your words give them something to argue with. Your silence gives them something to think about. When you use silence the right way, you're telling the other person, I'm not here to compete with your chaos. You're showing them that you won't raise your voice to match their volume. You won't speed up to match their urgency. You won't react just because they want you to. Silence is your way of saying, I hear you, but I don't move on demand. And this is where respect grows. Because people respect what they can't control. They respect the person who doesn't fold under pressure. They respect the one who doesn't let emotions hijack the moment. Silence shows emotional steadiness. It shows that you don't need to fight to be understood. You need to be calm to be clear. Some people use noise to create power. You use calm to create certainty. There are moments in relationships where talking more actually makes things worse. You're explaining yourself to someone who already understands you, they just don't want to acknowledge it. You're trying to fix a situation that the other person isn't even trying to meet you halfway on. You're trying to be heard by someone who's listening to respond, not listening to understand. In moments like these, silence becomes your boundary. It becomes your filter. It becomes the line where you stop giving energy to what isn't giving anything productive back. This doesn't mean you stonewall. It doesn't mean you punish someone with silence. It means you pick the right timing, the right tone, and the right moments to respond. It means you give yourself the space to think before you speak. It means you refuse to argue emotionally when the conversation needs logic. It means you maintain control over your delivery instead of letting the moment control you. Silence is also powerful because it shows self-respect. When you take a breath instead of reacting, you're letting your maturity speak for you. When you pause instead of exploding, you're choosing clarity over chaos. And when you walk away from a disrespectful moment instead of engaging with it, you're communicating that your peace is non-negotiable. People can argue with your words. They can't argue with your calm. What silence does, more than anything, is separate the people who value you from the people who only value your reactions. The ones who care about you will use your silence as a moment to reflect, adjust, and reconnect. The ones who don't will get frustrated because they can't emotionally pull you where they want you to go. Either way, you win because silence reveals intentions. When you learn to use silence as a tool instead of a retreat, you become someone who carries natural authority. Not loud, not aggressive, not intimidating, just centered, grounded, and deeply respected. Because silence, when you use it with intention, teaches people how to approach you. And that's how you gain respect without ever raising your voice. Emotional boundaries are one of the strongest forms of self-respect you can ever show, and yet they're the boundaries most people fail to set. Not because they don't want to, but because they're afraid of how someone might react. They're afraid of looking cold, afraid of seeming distant, afraid of being labeled as too much or not enough. But emotional boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about protecting the parts of you that keep you grounded, balanced, and healthy. A lot of people walk into relationships and immediately take responsibility for the other person's mood. If he's stressed, you absorb it. If he's irritated, you feel like you caused it. If he pulls away, you chase. If he's confused, you become the clarity. And before long, you're not in a relationship, you're managing someone else's emotional life like it's your full-time job. But that's the fastest path to losing yourself. And it's the fastest way to lose someone's respect. Because when a man feels like you're absorbing everything, he stops valuing what you hold inside. Emotional boundaries start with this truth. You are allowed to care without carrying everything. You are allowed to love without losing yourself. You are allowed to support without becoming someone else's emotional cushion. You don't have to fix every problem, soothe every feeling, or make peace with every storm someone brings to your door. You can stand beside someone without standing in their emotional fire. When you hold emotional boundaries, you don't take responsibility for reactions that aren't yours. If someone is upset, you can be compassionate without absorbing the blame. If someone is frustrated, you can listen without personalizing it. If someone is distant, you don't collapse inward, you stay steady. That steadiness is what earns respect, because it shows emotional maturity. It shows that you can stay in your lane even when someone else is swerving in theirs. You teach people how to treat your emotions by how you protect them. If you let someone's anger decide your tone, they'll use it. If you let someone's mood decide your energy, they'll lean on it. If you let someone's chaos dictate your peace, they'll keep bringing chaos. But when you stay calm, when you maintain your sense of self, even in uncomfortable moments, you become someone who commands respect simply by refusing to be moved by someone else's instability. People respect those who don't get dragged into emotional extremes. They respect the person who can say, I'm here, but I'm not losing myself in this. They respect the woman who can set boundaries without guilt, who can say no without apologizing, who can say, this conversation isn't healthy right now. Let's pause. Who can walk away from emotional manipulation with clarity instead of anger. Most importantly, emotional boundaries don't just protect you, they create healthier relationships. When you don't try to fix someone's emotional world, you give them the space to step up and fix it themselves. When you don't rescue them from every discomfort, they learn to handle things like an adult. And when you don't accept emotional dumping, you create a dynamic where communication becomes intentional, not impulsive. Holding emotional boundaries isn't cold, it's responsible, it's mature. It's a sign that you value your peace enough not to let anyone trample it. And the more you protect your emotional space, the more people recognize that your heart is valuable and access to it requires respect. Because emotional boundaries don't push people away, they filter out the ones who don't deserve a place close to you. Kindness is one of the most magnetic qualities a woman can have, but only when it's paired with strength. Kindness without boundaries turns into weakness. Kindness without self-respect turns into permission. And kindness without clarity becomes a welcome mat for people who take advantage of your softness. But when you practice firm kindness, gentle tone, steady energy, and clear limits, you create a presence that earns deep, lasting respect. Most people mistake kindness for compliance. They believe that if you're soft-spoken, you'll tolerate anything. If you're understanding, you'll excuse everything. If you care deeply, you'll accept less than you deserve. But real kindness isn't about letting things slide. It's not about being easy to handle. Real kindness is about choosing compassion without abandoning your standards. When someone speaks to you harshly, your kindness shows in your response, but your strength shows in how you don't let it slide. When someone takes advantage of your patience, your kindness shows in how you address it calmly, but your strength shows in how you don't continue allowing it. When someone disrespects your effort, your kindness shows in how you communicate honestly, but your strength shows in how you pull your energy back if they don't change. Kindness is powerful because it doesn't attack, it doesn't escalate, it doesn't compete. Kindness allows you to say the truth without destroying the connection, but strength ensures that the truth is heard. And when someone sees that you can stay composed while still holding the line, they understand immediately, you are not someone who can be played with. The most respected women are not the loudest, the harshest, or the toughest. They're the ones who stay kind without ever letting disrespect slide. They can smile and still say no. They can care and still walk away. They can listen and still disagree. They can love deeply and still refuse to accept behavior that shrinks them. This combination is rare. And because it's rare, it's respected. People remember how they feel around you. When your kindness makes them feel safe, they relax. But when your boundaries make them act right, they rise. That balance, warmth matched with firmness is what creates a dynamic where respect is not just earned once, but continuously reinforced. A kind woman without boundaries gets drained. A strong woman without warmth becomes unapproachable. But a woman who blends the two becomes unforgettable. She becomes the type of person you don't want to lose because you know she doesn't stay where she's disrespected. She becomes the woman who can correct you without shaming you. She can call out behavior without tearing you down. She can create accountability without creating fear. And here's the quiet truth. Men admire kindness, but they respect backbone. They value gentleness, but they follow strength. They're comforted by softness, but they are shaped by standards. When you are kind and firm, you send a clear message. I will treat you with respect, and I expect the same in return. Not through threats, not through anger, but through consistency, through follow-through, through the decisions you make when someone crosses a line. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to convince anyone to treat you better. Your kindness sets the tone, and your boundaries enforce it. Because when you stay kind without ever accepting disrespect, you show the world exactly how you expect to be treated. There is a certain kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself, and it's the strength of someone who is willing to walk away when the situation no longer aligns with their peace. Not out of anger, not out of fear, not out of punishment, but out of self-respect. When you're willing to walk away, you're telling the world something very important. I'm not afraid to lose anything that's not meant for me. And that mindset instantly changes the way people treat you. Most women lose respect not because they're too emotional or too demanding, but because they stay in situations long after their boundaries have been crossed. They keep hoping the other person will change. They keep shrinking themselves to make things work. They keep trying to prove they're worth choosing. But here's the truth. When you stay where you're not valued, you teach the other person that they don't have to value you to keep you. When you're willing to walk away, you break that pattern completely. You show that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. You show that someone's effort has to match the access they want in your life. You show that love is something you give, not something you beg for. And when a man realizes that you won't tolerate inconsistency, disrespect, or emotional crumbs, he either rises to meet your standards or quietly exits. Either outcome is clarity. Walking away isn't about being cold. It's about honoring yourself. It's about refusing to trade your emotional health for temporary connection. It's about understanding that peace is more valuable than promises, and that your future is more important than someone else's comfort. When you know your worth, you don't need to hold on to what hurts you. You don't need to justify why something is not that bad. You don't need to cling to potential while ignoring reality. And here's the thing, men can feel the difference between a woman who fears being alone and a woman who is whole on her own. The first gets tolerated, the second gets respected. Because when a man senses that you're not scared to lose him, he starts treating you like someone who deserves to be kept. When he knows you won't accept bare minimum effort, he stops offering it. When he sees that you're not emotionally dependent on his attention, he starts showing up with more intention. Being willing to walk away gives you your power back. It keeps you from becoming someone's emotional backup plan. It stops you from settling for half love or half effort. It reminds you that you have options, even when your heart tries to convince you otherwise. And the moment you hold that power, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving yourself. You start observing. You start choosing. You start requiring behavior instead of accepting words. And ironically, that's when people show you their real selves. Some will realize they've been taking you for granted and step up. Others will realize they can't manipulate you anymore and step out. But either way, walking away reveals the truth faster than any conversation ever could. Because when you are no longer afraid to lose someone, you become the kind of woman no one wants to lose.